Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today I thought it would be fun to do sort of like a part 1 and a part 2 real-time tutorial. So I've got 2 cherries here in my sketchbook, and I figured I would do one with my Polychromos colored pencils, and then I would do one with my Albert Dürer watercolor pencils, so we can kind of compare and see the difference between the two. So what I've done here is just created some swatches of all of the pencils. So it's nice between these two lines, between the Polychromos and the Albert Dürer. The colors are the exact same and the numbers are the exact same. So if you can see that, I'm going to leave this here for a second. You can pause the screen, get your colors ready. If you don't have these exact same pencils, at least you can see what the colors look like, so you can find something in your collection that is a close match to that. And I just did the colored pencils here, and then I added some water to the watercolor pencils just so you could see what it looks like once the water's added. And I'm just trying out this Beta Series Premium Sketchbook. It's a soft cover edition. It's mixed media. It says it's for dry and wet media, and it's from Stillman Birn. This is extra heavyweight white cold pressed watercolor paper, and it's 270 GSM. So the paper does feel, you know, pretty thick, and it says it's for dry and wet media. And as I'm feeling this, it's not super toothy. Like, it's not, if you've ever used like Arches paper or something like that, that's very toothy. Colored pencils don't go down good on that at all, but it's great for watercolor pencils and watercolor. So I really liked the feel of this one, so I wanted to see how both would work on it, so I thought that's what we would do today. So I've got all my pencils laid out here. Now I'm not sure if I'll use each one. I just kind of picked out whatever colors I thought I was going to use. And so I've got my 2 cherries here. I left this one darker just so you could kind of see what the outline, what I sketched out. And then I lightened this one with my kneadable eraser, and I'm just leaving that there so it holds the cover down. I need to get some little binder clips that will hold it down for me. But I did, you know, lighten this sketch up a little bit. And I got this reference photo from Unsplash, so I will try to link that down below in the description so that you guys can get that picture as well and follow along with this tutorial. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're going to be using our colored pencils first, and I'm going to start with the white because there's just one spot on this reference photo that I can see that has a pretty bright highlight, and it's over here. So I'm just going to lay that white down first. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this paper here so that as I'm coloring this one over, my hand's not smudging this sketch all over the place, and then you get graphite everywhere. So I'm just going to cover that up, but you guys will still be able to see the swatches. So I'm just going to lay this down, and I'm putting it down in about a medium pressure because I want to preserve that one little white spot really well. And then I'm going to take the light flesh. Now I know in some newer pencil sets, I think they've changed the name of this one. Is it? Yeah, it's beige red. So in my Albert Dürer set, it's called beige red, but the older set, I believe, was light flesh, or one or the other. But you'll know either one, but it'll still be number 132. So I'm just going to take this one, and I'm just going to go around that white just lightly. And I'm using about, you know, a light pressure because you want to start light and then you can build up layers as you go. If you put the color down too dark, it's hard to lighten it up, especially with colored pencils. And I'm also going to take this color over here on this other little bright highlight. And I'm doing small circular strokes. So instead of going back and forth like this, I'm doing little tiny circles because that's going to get the pigment down in a more even flow. and it's going to cover the surface area better. And then when we blend out, it's going to blend out better too. So then I'm going to go in with my light magenta, and I'm going to go around this little one over here, same as I did the other ones, just a little bit, and then around here, filling in the rest of this highlight. And I'm doing a pretty soft pressure with this one, and I'm already noticing that these colored pencils are laying down very well on this sketch paper. The color is popping just for barely touching the paper. So, I mean, that's nice to see right off the bat. I'm just going back in with that light flesh just to go over top of this to tone it down just slightly. So that's really nice to see that the color comes off well, but we'll have to see how it blends out, how it layers. And I'm just going to take that and go over top of this too. And I'm just going to take my white, just the white pencil, and go over top of all of this just to see if I can tone it down just slightly. Okay. So now we're going to take our rose carmine, and I'm going to put this in a few strategic places for right now. So in the back here, behind this towards the side, there's like a lighter area here. Just in front of the stem, there's a little lighter area. And then kind of curving along the sides of the cherry here, it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more muted, and over here on this side as well. So those are kind of the places that I'm going to be putting this. And I'm just going to go very lightly with this. And I'm constantly looking at my reference photo too to make sure, you know, I'm getting things in the right place. Now, this is a cherry. You know, we know cherries are typically red, right? But it's got different colors of red within it. So if you want your work to be realistic or to look a little more realistic, then really paying attention to where those colors are going, where the lights are, where the shadows are, things like that is really going to help make your work more realistic. And maybe you just want it to look like just a red cherry, and that's fine. That's totally fine. You know, not everybody's work has to look the same. You don't have to use the same colors at all. If you want your cherry to be purple, you could do a purple cherry. That's totally up to you. And you would just, you know, pick your purple colors and kind of work the same way that I am now. So I'm trying to go right up to that edge there. And then there's a little spot here where it's a little darker, but there's just a little bit of like rim lighting, I would like to call it. So I'm just going to do a thin line here, and then there's a little bit more down here where it comes out a little bit. And then same over on this side. So it comes out a little bit more here. And I'm just going around the edges a little bit with just slightly more pressure, just to define them a little bit more. So for most of this first layer, we're going to be using a light pressure because you don't want to fill in all the tooth right away. And I'm just going to go to that white pencil and just put a little bit of this on top too, just to tone this down a little bit. So yeah, we don't want to fill in the tooth of the paper right away because maybe we didn't get the colors exactly right. Maybe we need to make them a little bit darker. Maybe the tone's not right, so you need to add a little bit in there. So even if you're burnishing or whatever your blending method is, using solvent, odorless mineral spirits, I find it's best to never go in with a heavy hand right away so that you always have the option to change things up as you need to later on. And the reason I'm using the white right now is because it's not such a bright red as the, what is this, rose carmine? So it's a little bit of a brighter, like pinky rose, whereas this is just a little bit more muted. You could even go on top with maybe a little bit of the gray that we're going to use, and if I find it's too bright when we blend it out, I might do that, add a little bit of the gray to it. But I find going into the white just kind of like tones it down enough, just makes it not as bright. All right, so I'm going to take my alizarin crimson and I'm going to fill in most of this main part down here. So this is our darker area here, but I'm going to put the alizarin crimson kind of in this middle area. And then we've got little dark patches here and there. So I'm just going to basically fill this spot in. So I hope you guys enjoy this real-time tutorial. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. I hope it's not too long, but I figured it would be useful for you to see, you know, from start to finish, like actually how I create a piece, how I go about, you know, blending, coloring, because I've been sort of speeding up the boring parts, or at least I think they're the boring parts. But you know, if somebody's just starting out in colored pencils, or they're not exactly sure, you know, how you're layering, how you're putting that pencil down, how exactly you're blending it out, something like this is really useful. A tutorial like this is really useful. And I still enjoy watching them. And I know a lot of people are worried about color. I just need to have the right color. I need to know the right color. Now, in this tutorial, I am giving you the exact colors I'm using, exactly where I'm placing them. You can see all this in real time. But honestly, color's not that big of a deal. I mean, a warm red is a warm red. A cool red is a cool red. Basically, as long as you're getting the gist of it, you know, the feel of it, then that's really what counts. Now I'm going to take this alizarin crimson too and just fill in these other spots that we left blank back here. So, I mean, you know, the color is not that big of a deal. If you're getting red in a red spot, that's what matters. And just a little bit here in front of the stem. So I'm not trying to cover up all of that light pink area, just a smidgen. And I'm just going over just this middle part again, just very lightly. Okay. So now I'm going to take the deep scarlet red and I'm going to sort of do the top half of the shadow because this is a really bright red. And I'm going to go into mostly this whole thing with this color. And then we're going to take our dark red and kind of fill in the more dark spots. So if you want to just make it easy for yourself, just color the whole spot with this color. Because there is some nice really pops of really bright red in here. But I'm going to leave a few little white spots just where that I really want that dark to show. Now take your time when you're doing this. Don't rush it. If you're feeling rushed, slow down, pause the video, you know, rewind it, whatever you have to do. Because I don't want you to feel rushed. I want you to be able to take your time, feel comfortable with your doing it. It might even benefit you from doing tutorials like this, you know, a few times so you really get a feel for it. Your first time, you're basically just, you know, experimenting, trying it, and then you might say, well, you know, I like the way I did this, but I didn't like the way I did this. So then do it again and do what you liked, but leave out what you didn't like. You know, that's the beauty of art. You can do the same picture as many times as you want. There's no rules against that. Basically, there's no rules in art except for copyright. You just don't want to, you know, take anybody else's art and claim it as yours, or take anybody else's pictures and claim them as yours. But other than that, you know, when you're making your art, there's really no rules. You can do basically whatever you want. And I do that quite a lot. I love to do a lot of mixed media art. So I don't always just do colored pencil like this. A lot of the time I will include, you know, watercolor, colored pencil on top, gouache, all kinds of different things, markers and colored pencil on top. Actually, I haven't used my Copic markers in quite a long time, so I might get those out and do a tutorial with those. So if you'd like to see that, you know, let me know down in the comments below, because I would absolutely love to do a tutorial with them. I haven't used them in such a long time. Okay, I'm getting to where I'm liking this. So already I hope you guys can see there is little shifts in color here and there. You can tell, you know, what's a little more saturated, what's a little more muted, what's a little more brighted, what's a little more bright, you know. Okay, and then we're going to go in with that dark red, and I'm really going to concentrate in these little white spots that I left, right here and down here, but then it's also in a few places within that bright too. So these ones are quite dark, so I'm really going to get that color in there. But then also you can see a bit of a difference overlapping all sort of the lower half to lower third of this shadow area here. So that's where I'm going to put this color. Yeah, just a touch up here. So I'm starting really light just in case I get it in an area that I don't like it, maybe I can, you know, somehow go over it, fix it. But I'm sort of just glazing this color over top of the other color, so I'm not, like you can see, it's not as dark as these areas here, but it's definitely darker than here. It's kind of mixing the two colors together, and I like to call that glazing. In watercolor, if you've ever used watercolor, you do a lot of, well, some people do a lot of glazing where you're doing like layer over layer, adding a little bit more color, a little bit different of a tone. You can mute colors really well that way, tone down the saturation, and that's kind of what we're doing right here. We're just toning it down slightly, but it's also making it just slightly darker as well. And then just a little bit over here. And a tiny bit right here. Okay. And then I'm going to go down. There's a little shadow down here at the bottom and then like a cast shadow. So I'm going to go in with this just down here. So we're still using our dark red. And I'm just going to fill in a little bit here. So this is on the cherry. This part is still on the cherry, like on the lower half, and it's kind of making like a upside down oval of a cast, so I'm trying to imitate that a little bit. And it's not very dark, but just enough there on the bottom. And then we're going to go in with this red violet, and this is what we're going to do that shadow on the ground for, or table, whatever it is. I guess the cherry would probably be would be sitting on a table. All right, so just gonna fill this in a little bit here, and this is sort of doing like the opposite way. And I'm trying to get it so where it's darker right at the bottom of the cherry. And even if some of this color overlaps onto the bottom of the cherry itself, that's fine, because the two colors are kind of reflecting each other, like the cherry's reflecting off of the top of the table. Okay. And I'm just going to take a little bit of that dark red and just the top of this here. Just hit that. Okay. All right, so that's the body of the cherry really down. And now we're going to do the stem and this part up here. So I'm going to take this May green color, and I'm going to sort of focus it onto the left-hand side of our stem. It's not quite the right color. It's more of like a muted May green color like this, but that's where our gray is going to come in. So I'm going to use the gray to go on top and go on to the right-hand side more, and we're going to kind of mute that color a little bit. And then we'll glaze a little bit with the green gold, just because I didn't have the perfect color that I wanted in the set. So I'm going to use a few colors to get that effect. So I'm just sort of barely doing this green along the right side. I just want it to be just barely a hint. I'm barely even touching because this paper really snags that color up well. And then we're going to go in with our warm gray 2. And I'm going to go over most of the whole stem with this color just because I want to tone down that green, but I also want it to be like a grayish shade on the other side. So I'm pretty much just going to cover the whole stem with this. And again, just a light hand. Now I'm not quite going up to the edge of the stem just because I do want there is kind of like a bright green right up against the edge of that stem, but I'm pretty much, you know, filling in everything else. And up here, up until, you know, pretty much the curve of the stem starts, I'm filling in the whole thing. Okay. So then we're going to take our green gold, and I'm just going to put this in a few places. I noticed it down here, just around the base of the stem, and sort of on the right-hand side a bit. And then I'm going to sort of work this sort of in the middle of the stem all the way up till about here. And that's just going to add a little bit more muted green to it. And there is a little bit of like goldeny, coppery colors in here, but the stem's so small, on a small scale like this, you can't get, so if you zoomed into the reference photos, you can see all these little tiny specks of color and different variations of color. But on such a small scale like this, it's really hard to get all those little tiny details. Now, if you wanted to blow this picture up and do your cherry, you know, maybe this big, can you see both my hands this big? Then yeah, you could absolutely get all those little details in there. But where we're doing this picture, you know, on such a small scale, you're not going to get all that detail in there. It's way too small for that. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my burnt ochre, and I'm going to fill in most of this top part here. Okay, and I'm just going to grab that May green again, and there is a little spot in here that has sort of a greeny cast to it, so I'm just going to throw that in with this here. Not a whole lot, just enough to give a suggestion that there's a little bit of green in there. And then I'm going to go in with burnt umber, and I'm just going to try to fill in those little spots that are the darkest. There's a couple little spots in here and under the stem where it's really got some shadows. And you don't have to be as precise as this if you don't want to. And I'm just going to take that burnt ochre and just go over everything just lightly again. Okay. And just maybe another hint of that May green, just right in here. There. Okay, so our first layer is down. Now, there's a few different ways that you can blend. You can take a white pencil and blend this out, like so you could just go in with your Polychromos white. I find because the Polychromos is a little bit harder, it's really hard to blend things out well. You'd be better off using a wax pencil. So if you had Prismacolors, Caran d'Ache, you could use their white pencils and blend out, or you can even use like one of these. This is the Caran d'Ache full blender. It's just a colorless blender, so I know most colored pencil brands make one of these. So it just basically blends out the color. I don't like these because I find I have a weak wrist, and I find if I burnish a whole lot, my wrist really hurts. So I like to use odorless mineral spirits because you don't have to use any pressure. It blends the color out very nicely. You're saving your colored pencils because you're not having to go in and burnish, so you're keeping, you know, the tips on them longer. And I like to use the Gamsol odorless mineral spirits. And I just have a little piece of paper towel here. You could use paper towel, Viva paper towel, anything like that. And I just have a few brushes that I keep dedicated to this. And yeah, so I'll show you guys how I blend this out with my odorless mineral spirits. So it is odorless, but it's still a solvent. So you want to keep the top on it as much as possible. So what I do is when I'm using it, I'll take off this part, but I'll keep this part on as much as I want. So I'll open it, dip into it, and put the cap back on. Just because you don't realize, because it's odorless, that the smell and the chemicals are still getting out into the air. And, you know, it is chemicals in there. And how I keep it is I just keep like a makeup sponge or something in that, and I pour the OMS onto that so to get it a little bit damp. And then as I'm working my brush in there, it's also, you can see I flipped it over recently, but it cleans the colors off your brush as you're going back in. So when you're going from area to area, you're not transferring colors, but you can also use your paper towel for that and just wipe it off and then go back in. So we'll blend this out real quick. And I'm probably going to start with the stem and bring it into the green, just because I really don't want the reds to go up into the stem. So I'm just going to dab, and I'm using my smallest one because the areas here are pretty small. This is a pretty small picture. And I'm sort of rubbing but dabbing it at the same time. If you just completely rub it like this, you're going to rub out all your detail. But we do want the colors to blend nicely. And you'll notice as you use the OMS or the odorless mineral spirits, it does darken the colors up a little bit. But as they dry, it will dry back down closer to what you have had for colors. So, but this is my favorite, absolute favorite way to blend out colored pencils. Now, when I've just got smooth transitions, smooth gradients, I'll go ahead and just rub because I want this area to be pretty smooth. And I find when you're blending out with OMS, your first layer or your first couple of layers of colored pencil, you can use a little bit more. So you see I'm dipping in and then I'm going right onto the paper. But let's say I'm doing, you know, a commission of a dog or something where it's got, you know, a lot of fur on it. You're going to have to do a few layers to really build up the texture, build up the color of the fur, stuff like that. So the first layer I might do this way, and then after you get enough colored pencil onto the paper, when you're going in with your next layers, to really fill out some detail and stuff, you want to do less and less odorless mineral spirits, because the more colored pencil you have on the paper and the more OMS that you're going in with, it's just going to start lifting up that colored pencil. It's not going to start blending it as much. So that's why further into the piece you want to do a little bit less. And I'm just blending out these highlights now. So going in with that white pencil first, laying it down and really doing a little bit of a harder pressure in that area will keep that spot nice and white so that other colors won't blend over it, because it's like a wax sort of, so it's kind of burnishing the area. So that's one of the nice things I like to do when I notice there is a truly bright white highlight. And if you couldn't get it as bright or as white as you wanted it, you can always go in with, you know, a little bit of gouache, a little bit of gel pen, you know, something like that. As long as it's, you don't care if it's not archival, and you don't care if it's, you know, not going to last 20, 30 years, whatever, 50 years, then it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to start blending the lightest spots now. So I kind of typically like to go light to dark, but you can blend however you like. So for typical, you know, typically small illustrations like this, small pieces like this, you really might only need maybe one, maybe two layers, you know, to get the colored pencil, you know, brightness, smoothness where you like it. But if you're doing bigger pieces and you need to do a lot of layering, you might need to do, you know, 4, 5, 10 different layers depending, you know, what your subject is. This has a lot of just flat colors in it, so it's easier to get away with, you know, 1 or 2 layers. But some pieces, like, you know, if you're doing a dog, if you're doing a cat, and they've got lots of different details and layers in their fur, you might not be able to get away with just a couple of layers. Sometimes you really have to build up that texture in the fur. So I'm starting to go into that spot where we laid down our alizarin crimson, and I'm just getting it to blend into our light area as well. So I'm blending the two areas together, kind of. And I'm trying to avoid that really dark spot on the bottom and our shadow spot just about this area as well right now. And this is something I really like to take my time with. I find blending out and using colored pencils very meditative. So I don't mind taking my time with this and getting things just exactly where I want them. Okay, so now I'm going to start going up into that brighter red area. get back here while I'm at it too, so I don't forget. And I'm going to start going down into that darker. And I'm going to leave those darkest darks for right at the very end. Blend them out. And I'm going to blend down here now. And I'm going to blend just a little bit past where I put that color so that it kind of softens out a little bit. And just anywhere where I see it needs to be a little more blended, I just go ahead and do that. And then I'm just going to take this and make sure I get all the red and all the color out of my brush really well. Because when you go in to do another piece, let's see you're doing a piece that's, you know, completely different colors. You don't want to get that red in there. So I make sure that I get it all out of my brush really well. So that's our first layer. I'm really pleased with how this came out on this paper. I actually quite like it. We might do another layer just to brighten some more spots up, but we need to let the OMS dry now. So you need to let it dry for a good, you know, 10 minutes or so, depending on how absorbent your paper is. And you'll be able to see, because I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a faint, just a faint outline on the back of where we can see where we put the OMS down. So once it dries, it'll dry completely clear. You won't be able to see it at all. If you've used too much OMS, Sometimes you'll see a little bit of an outline around your object, but most of the time once it dries, unless the color has spread outside of your object, it will dry completely down to the color of the paper again. So before you go on with your next layer, you need to let this dry completely, because if you go on with your pencils now, you could damage the tooth of the paper. You could lift it because it's wet. Just imagine rubbing over top of wet paper. It's going to peel up, so you could really damage it. So we'll let it set for now, and then we'll come back and touch up, brighten any areas. Because it laid down pretty well, I think, you know, we'll be 2 layers, add a little bit of details, and we'll be done. So I hope you guys are enjoying this tutorial so far. If you are, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know down in the comments below what other kind of tutorials that you would like to see, what kind of mediums you'd like me to do. I get bored doing the same medium and the same kind of tutorials all the time, so I don't mind switching it up, trying different subjects, so just let me know. And we'll let this dry and then we'll come back. Okay, so I've let our cherry dry for a few minutes. It seems, you know, to be much drier now. So we're just gonna go back on top and do a few more little details. If you wanna leave your cherry like this right now, go right ahead. This is a great stopping point. But if you wanna, you know, bump up your art to sort of the next level, get a little bit more realism, a little bit more detail in there. I mean, it's hard to get too realistic because it's such a small proportion. But if you want to, you know, get better, then it's always nice to do a little bit more. So I'm just going to go in with that white and just go over top all of our highlights here. And I'm going to take that light flesh and go around this one too. And then I'm just going to go right to that rose carmine color. And put this down, but I'm not going to go quite to the edge. Because I want there to be a lighter spot right at that edge there. And we'll go back with our white pencil like we did again to create that sort of really toned down look around the edge of the cherry. Now you'll notice with this layer, I'm not being as precise. I get to be a little, just slightly sloppier. You know, I would suggest, so I'm just going back in with that white now and just going around the edges. Because we've already got that first layer down, we know where our colors are going to be. I'm still really looking at my reference photo, but I don't have to put the color down as super precise because we've already got a layer under us. So this is going to blend out a little bit better now than the first layer did. Or at least that's what I find usually. This is new paper that I'm using here, so we'll find out how our second layer blends out. The first layer did pretty good, so I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. So then we're going to go back in with our alizarin crimson and do the bottom part here. And I'm making sure to kind of overlap a little bit. I find the second layer always goes a lot faster because you've already got, you know, all your colors placed down. You know where you used the pencil before. You still want to be looking at your picture, your reference, because you don't want to put the color in places where it's not supposed to be. But you're almost, you know, following where you already had the color. And then I'm going to go in with that deep scarlet and go over the top part of this again. Here I'm really going to define this edge around this highlight and let it bleed in just a little bit here and there because it's not a perfect highlight. There are some spots where it's broken up and the color's bleeding in there. And I'm just going to do a touch back here again. All right, and I'm going to go in with our dark red. And same, we're gonna just, those spots we want to be a little bit darker. We're gonna really concentrate it there. And then just glaze it over the other spots. Now I'm noticing on this sketchbook that I'm trying out here, the second layer seems to be laying down just beautifully over top of the first layer. And even more so, I'm finding with this color, I'm really having to not press at all. Like I'm barely touching the paper and it's making a big difference in the color. So this might be one of my new favorite sketchbooks for colored pencils. We'll see, you know, how our watercolor one does, because this does sort of say it's meant for watercolor. And I have the smooth version as well, because I thought I would want to do watercolor in this and colored pencils in the other version, but when I was feeling the paper surface, the smooth version just felt so smooth, almost like Bristol paper, but with like a tiny little bit of tooth. So then I wasn't sure if that would actually be good for colored pencil at all. It almost felt like it would be too slick. But I will definitely try a colored pencil piece on that too, just to let you know how it turns out. Okay, and again, I'm going to take this color down here and just create some of that shadow. And I'm going to take it just under the cherry too. And I'm going to take a little bit, just a little bit over here, because I don't want to overpower this too much, but there's just a slight dark patch on either side of the cherry, but it's not a whole dark patch. So I've waited for the second layer because I don't want to really make it dark. I just want to add little patchy areas here and there. So I'm just sort of, I'm not coloring a whole area. I'm just doing a little bit here and a little bit here, just to try to get in that texture. If you don't want to do this, then feel free to just leave it with just the one color, or you could even do a little bit solid on either side because it's a sphere, right? So it will make it look rounded, but there is like a very bright area on the outside. Okay, so we'll leave that there. I'm going to take the May green and just go on the left side here a little bit. Just to really define this edge. And I'm basically just going to take it up to there. Then I'm going to take our gray again, go in on the other side. I'm going to press just a little bit harder just at the edge, just to get a nice defined line there. And again, our second layer is just light pressure. It's the same pressure basically that I did for the whole first layer. The only spots where I'm doing a little bit more pressure is just on any of the little, you know, spots around the cherry, and even that you don't have to. I'm just going to take that green gold and just do a tiny bit up here where it's reflecting. And just a tiny bit down here. All right, and I'm going to take that burnt ochre color and I'm going to go in here. Basically going over the whole of this top spot, but it's so small, doesn't take much. And then I'm going to take that burnt umber again and just do it in a couple of those spots where we just had, you know, some really darker shadows. And I'm going to take this as well, just down here at the bottom of the cherry too. And just a little bit around the front here, because this is going to cause that that shadowed area where the stem is sort of sitting down, and a little bit on the stem too. So the reason I didn't do this the first time when we were putting the first layer down, because I didn't want the color to overpower the reds and stuff that we were having there, because the dark umber is such a dark and saturated color. It can really overpower some other colors. So that's why I tend to choose to maybe glaze with this color. There. And then I'm just going to take a hint of that May green again and just throw it up here. Just a hint of it. All right, and then we're going to take our odorless mineral spirit, or whatever your blending choice is, and we're going to blend everything out again. Now remember, if you are doing the odorless mineral spirits, because this is our second layer and we already have two layers of color pencil down on the paper, you don't need as much. So I'll do a little bit, see how I kind of dab a little bit off, and then I'll decide if I have too much, if I need to go back in and get a little bit more. But you don't want to have too much on your brush, and then you just end up lifting the colored pencil off the paper rather than blending it in to our layer before. So now I'm being careful down here. Instead of dragging the darker color up into the stem, I'm trying to push it down because I don't want to end up blending that color up too high. It's just down at the bottom of the stem. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing, go over our highlights. And again, I like to work light to dark, but you do however you like to blend. I'm just taking my time going around the edges. I've turned my brush, so instead of like that, I've turned it onto the side just to get a more precise point. And I should have mentioned while we were doing our layers and while we're blending out now, but if you find it hard, to do everything in one spot. I've got this down so that you guys can have a good view of it, so that I'm not moving the sketchbook around all the place. But if you have a really hard time, you know, coloring at a certain angle, feel free to move your sketchbook, turn it upside down if you have to get a certain way. Like if this is awkward for you and you'd rather do it in this motion, whatever, turn your sketchbook around. You know, there's no rules saying that you have to have it at a certain angle or anything like that. So feel free to do what works for you. Again, just making sure I dab off the excess, because going right into the pot and going onto the paper is just too much at this point. Okay. And up into our other red. And then our last little bit down here. And again, I'm just going to blend out a little bit from that shadow. And I'm just going to clean my brush off really good until I can't see any red coming off of it. And close that back up. There. So that's our little cherry in colored pencils. Yeah. What I might do, just because the very bottom of the cherry just kind of blended out, I again would let this set because you just went on top with the odorless mineral spirits. But I'm just going to do, just define this line just a tiny bit under the cherry. So that there's just a clear difference between the cherry and the table. And just bring it up slightly on either side. There. So that's where I'm going to leave that at today. I really hope that this showed you how to, you know, pick some colors. We've got a little variety of colors in there. Showed you how to lay them down, blend them out, and create a nice little piece. And these are the colors that we used so that you can see. Now, if you liked this tutorial, please be sure to subscribe, like the video, and come back because we're going to do this one in watercolors. So these were our colored pencils that we used, and now we're going to use the exact same colors in the Faber Castell Albert Dürer watercolors. So I've got them all swatched out here with the water, and that will be another tutorial. So if you're looking forward to that, and if you want to see more tutorials like this, then please let me know down in the comments what you want to see, because I'm not only making these videos for myself, but I'm making them for you. So I want them to be helpful for you. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.